Mike, you got to do this again.
Oh, no, absolutely. It's the Mike and George coffee hour. Let's grab some coffee.
Love it. Love it. Well, Mike, thanks for being here. I appreciate you being on the podcast. And as I said, big fan of you as an entrepreneur, as an exec in the startup kind of fintech world, and excited for the conversation. So thanks for making the time.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much.
You've been in the tech entrepreneurial world for quite some time, if I can say, 20, 25 plus years. Mm-hmm. And what I love about your story is it's really focused actually around consumers to governments, that connectivity, and specifically around customer insight. I always wonder, how did you get your start into this whole world that you've been pretty consistent with for the past 20 years?
I had a great professor at Cal State Northridge who taught statistics, and he taught everything in the context of gambling. Now, I'm not telling you right now, George, I'm some massive gambler or I have a gambling problem per se. It's that he made it such an interesting topic and so approachable. And so I've always loved math. I'm one of those people that if you ask the question, do you love calculus? I'll resoundingly say, yes, I love calculus. But as I look back across my career, it's always been taking data, applying some math to it, and trying to drive some insight. And so whether you're talking about being at, JD Power, in some of the early years at JD Power, or getting to be at Nielson and the TV ratings or the Harris poll, or even here at Zest, everything is about taking data and transforming it into some meaningful insight.
Have you seen obviously, we're going to get into the AI craze in a second here, but for someone who's been in the data world for that long, what did it look like 15, 20 years ago versus how it looks like today? For those who aren't in that space as closely as you are.
Oh my word. I remember, so when I was at JD Power, we would have clients and you'd do this research study and you would print out all of the tables with basically a pivot table, any potential outcome or crosstab that you could come up with. And you'd have, binders that are 10 inches stacked up on your desk, and you'd be going page by page, trying to create a story, which now today actually AI could do for you and find those insights for you. But my gosh, I think that's what I've loved throughout my career is that, I tend to look at multiple different factors. I'm able to pull it together in a simpler story. And that also applies to going after a strategy or how you run your business and things like that. You're constantly being fed data, but somewhere in there is that thread, is that strategy, and you have to be able to basically distill it down to some action. And so, I do remember the binders that, we delivered to American Honda that, were probably as tall as me stacked up every month with insights. And, it was a different time for sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was actually having a conversation with a colleague internally about data and how important it is for it to be clean. But also how important it is for literally every function you can imagine. I'm more in the sort of business development / sales world in my work. And then, how important it is with Salesforce as an example, or just to stay on top of, your ecosystem and to understand your activity to the dot, how important that is super critical. But you also don't get the same level of attraction, I would say, to data in an organization. Like some people love it. Some people are a bit resistant to it. Do you feel that, especially being involved so closely to big data, that there are different levels of attraction, I would say, to it?
Well, I don't know about attraction. I mean, Valentine's Day has a past, so I don't know much about that. But what I can tell you is that to be able to do any of the jobs that I've done, or even currently at Zest AI, data is king, and making sure that it's appropriately representative. And probably, George, I've been surrounded by a bunch of math geeks my whole career, and so we all love data. And so, yeah, there's probably a great affection for it. And if I were to replace my wife, Nancy, on Valentine's Day, it would probably be in the category of data, really a rich data set.
In the data space. What's the hardest part for you? Like, is it the sort of extraction? Is it the cleanup of it? Is it making sure that the organization is fully aligned as to how to map it? Like, what part of the process is the most difficult?
Well, I think, when you're dealing with lots of data, you've got a lot of challenges. So there's the missing data question. And so
Mhm.
if you're dealing with something having to do with consumers and like a credit profile and you have missing data, current credit system says, I can't actually even score them. So they kick them out of the ecosystem. So it actually has real world impacts if you have missing data and how to solve for that. The second area really comes around representation, making sure that you have representative data for the problem you're trying to solve. And so in my days at the Harris poll, and if I'm doing a political poll, I need to make sure that I have a sufficient sample of Asian American Pacific Islanders if I'm going to be doing a survey or a poll in the Hawaiian Islands. But yet, oftentimes here in the US, we are okay with doing surveys or research or trying to glean insights with these large national data sets that underrepresent certain communities, and they actually leave them out of
Mhm.
the decision or outcome that you're trying to drive towards.
Is that what's been your sort of personal driver? And I know we'll get to Zest in a sec, but I feel like you have this personal inclination to make sure that there's some, I would say, fairness, right? Some transparency behind the data and making sure it's fairly equal to everybody who it's leveraging, from.
Sure. It is personal. I mean, I think about my dad grew up in the San Fernando Valley. He was the son of a Navy man, a great Irishman. My grandfather grew up in a converted coupe, but finished his career, after the Marine Corps, running a multi-billion-dollar defense company. And so why that matters is that my dad had lived the American dream. And I'm able to stand on that giant, my father and my mom, and actually propel myself ahead. And so I've had a lot of opportunity. I've been very privileged on that. So when I think about the America that I want for my kids, the few of them that I have, the 5 of them that I have, is I want something where there's an environment where everybody has an equal access to opportunity. And so I don't know if it's fairness. It's just really this shift in that why can't we have a collective abundance where there doesn't have to be winners and losers so that we can come together and solve these problems and create an opportunity. That doesn't mean everybody's going to win. I'm not talking about, like everybody's exactly the same. There will be people who will excel and people who won't. But let's at least have everybody be starting from the same point in the race. And that's the drive, at least for me today. And as I look across my career, is that's been something that's been super important to me.
What has been the most, well, speaking of what's important to you, what has been, because you've had several executive roles. Those aren't easy to go into. They're not easy to stay consistent with and kind of progress over the course of more than a year, usually. So I'm always I'm always interested in, like, how do you, first of all, squeeze into those kind of roles, build that career track for you in the world of whether it's data, fintech, because you have to have the technical substance plus the leadership to be able to be in a management world. So as with a father who was, successful and capitalizing on the American dream, how were you able to pivot and squeeze and navigate through your career? Like, what sort of attributes have helped you the most?
So I probably start with, it's something my mom's an artist. She's very creative. And even though, I love math, I really like creativity. And so whether it be painting or art or things like that, it's some of my favorite times in my life have been sitting with my mom and doing a watercolor or things of that sort. And so it's these two sides of Mike where you have the highly technical, like the quantitative side of it, but then the soft side, which tends to be more creative. And so I have really focused through my life on this toughness or being relentless when I face with the problem. Don't go the opposite way. I lean into it. And, the sport that I do, I've tended to do martial arts for the better part of two decades. And if you were to talk to one of my instructors, they'll say I usually lead with my face. I jump in face first on things, get hit usually the first time. But why that matters is like this toughness is I'm willing to take a chance on myself. I'm willing to put myself in a risky situation where I might know a lot about it. I'm willing to approach problems differently, and that relies on some of my creativity, right? I'm betting on myself and I'm betting on the people around you. And then I would say where, in some of my recent discussions I've been having with some of my coaches is currently in my career, I'm really trying to be, and I think I'm getting real superpower off of just being Mike. I used to think I needed to be like every Google executive and sound like a PhD professor talking about stats all the time. But what I realized is my superpower is that, I can tell you about, one of our, finance people that just had his new son. And I can tell you about, just this community that we've created at Zest, people really coming together, being their true selves. And that, I think, comes with maybe time, or at least a perspective that each of us can be our authentic self. And if we truly are, that diversity of thought and experience and everybody bringing it to the table is really where our company today is getting its power from.
Mike, I think my love for you is expanding through this conversation.
Yeah. Only virtual hug. Is it a virtual hug right now happening?
I think so. I think we can. Okay. Yeah, we're grabbing coffee and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, in all seriousness, the reason I say that is, cheers. You don't often hear that. I mean, I think it's starting to be a bit of a better conversation. This whole thing around authenticity, self-awareness, like kind of the Brené Brown mindset. But it's easy to talk about it as a CEO, to be honest, in a very technical world where, to your point, the big players around you are very, very, very smart. They're very knowledgeable. Sure. And sometimes that could be intimidating when you step into that role and you're like, do I have to be Satya Nadella? Do I have to be this CEO? How am I projecting? It's easier said than done is what I'm saying. And one, kudos to you for invoking that, the ability just to be yourself, because I think that also trickles to the entire company. Like if I see that in my CEO, I'm like, oh, damn, I guess I can be relaxed and just be myself.
Well, think of it, George, like this quiet confidence that you can have. So Tuesday, I had the opportunity to go and be part of a lecture at Harvard. In the business school, they wrote a Harvard case study on Zest AI. I was joined by Dr. Sean Kamkar, who's our principal data scientist. The guy's got a PhD in AI from Stanford. He was at NASA. He was like a rocket scientist. I mean, I don't think there's a smarter quantitative human on the planet, but he does stand-up comedy. He's a father of two. You see his face light up when he talks about Margot and Jack, his two kids. Like, he brings in the power that he now has in the environment and culture that he and I and the rest of the leadership team have created. He brings all that to the table and is now like superpowered. Yeah, he's smart. He's always been smart. But now, even in that class setting, people were able to relate with him and connect with him in a truly authentic way.
Two things. How are you carving out the time as a CEO with many, many different hats that you have to focus on? How are you carving out time to know all these things about your employees? I know it sounds like this is the standard, and I think it should be. But again, I think very few CEOs might know their closest counterparts to that level of detail. Personally speaking.
That's my job. I mean, my job is not to be the smartest guy every time in the room. My job is to bring the best out of everyone and to get our collective company leaning all in the same together, but effectively as a group, as a team, as a community. I use that word purposely, community, to try to solve issues. I mean, that's, if Zest AI were a human, our super talent is the ability to face adversity or a challenge. And we also lean into that and we evolve and we adapt to it. But that only comes from checking your ego, having an organization where you're just relentless about focusing on the importance of culture and who you hire. You hire people who are okay. They don't have to be the smartest people in the room. And so Sean, Dr. Kamkar, he'll never tell you he's got his PhD. He's the most humble person ever. But that's different than other companies that I've worked at in the past where, like, you've got to be the smartest guy in the room. You've always got to flex in front of the boss. It's like, no, we don't actually celebrate that at our company.
Was that always the case? Like from day one, that was a tenet of Zest AI? Was it as a result of something that happened that you're like, you know what, we got to change that?
I think for me, what I brought to the table when I joined Zest over 5 years ago is that's what I brought. And I've been blessed by surrounding myself with a new leadership team that has really led a cultural change in the organization, that celebrates the accomplishments of the collective, not just the individual. I'm not saying that there's not smart people, but I am saying what we really celebrate is the collective. It's, great. We grew our customer base by over 75% last year in a difficult financial market. It's pretty cool. But actually, what I want to celebrate is the how we did it and the fact that people actually look forward to coming in, solving interesting problems, and actually trying to move these important issues in society ahead. That's what I want to actually celebrate. And so I think if I think early in my career, you sit there and see an executive up there talking about the increase in revenue, improving profitability, driving your EBITDA margin. Got it. We all learned that in business school. But that's not why you work at a company. You work at a company because you believe that you can make a difference on an important issue, and it matters to me most because I care about the person who's sitting next to me. So I talked about my dad being a Marine. For him, it wasn't even about any of the missions that he was ever on. It was always about the brother sitting next to him. And so I think it's some of that mentality, or even how he raised us, I was one of 4 kids, as we were a fighting unit. He would call us a fighting unit, like a Marine Corps. Together as a collective, each of us had a job, and we knew what the other person was doing. Brought a little flavor of that to Zest.
Love it. No pun intended, obviously. Yeah, little flavor to Zest.
Yeah.
How did you come across the opportunity? Like, how did that happen? Walk me through the precursor. So day one, how do you jump into the COO level before becoming CEO?
Yeah. So one of my intern had just come over from Israel to be an intern for me at JD Power and Associates, Yariv Robinson. He now has an investment company called Kingfisher Investment, and they had invested in Zest. And so he knew that they were going to be pivoting from being a B2C lender that leveraged machine learning and AI, and wanted to bring in somebody with a bit more B2B background. And so that's how I got the shake. So in the end, it was 20 years in the making by now my best friend.
Wow. That's amazing. How big or how small was the company then when you first joined?
Geez, we had a few customers, something like that 5 years ago. So we've got as of yesterday, maybe 185, 186 customers.
Wow.
It's a heck of a journey. I mean, like, we fell in love, George, in the beginning with this idea of like all the big banks are going to use our technology. And at the time, really, that's because of the cost associated, the time, the investment, the subject matter expertise. It really was the big banks were the ones that can consume it. And it was great for us because it battle tested us. We had to solve all these really difficult problems. But really the inertia came from realizing that mid-sized credit unions, or even a small credit union like Molokai Credit Union that does hundreds of applications a year, not thousands, can actually have access to the same technology to the likes of like Citibank, one of our bigger customers.
Interesting. So you get sort of exposed to this opportunity, right? And they're like, listen, we're trying to build AI that specializes in enhancing credit underwriting, the whole process through the use, through the execution. What do you know about credit underwriting at this point, like in day one? Or was it all zero? Huh? What was the most interesting to you when you actually, you're sitting there, you're 30 days in, 60 days in, you're looking at the traditional credit underwriting process and what Zest is trying to do. What stands out to you the most that actually makes you excited about leading the helm of this startup?
Well, I mean, so let me unpack that question. So first, you're starting in an organization, you're jumping in, and it's like has to do with credit. So I had been at Nielson, the TV ratings company, leading the insights business, which is their custom research business, from Sydney, Australia to Poland. And then now I'm going to go into credit underwriting. In the end, it's just math. Really is just math, right? And so the topic is the same. We're just applying it to a different business issue. I think for me, what I'm most excited about is that we solve an important issue for our society today. And so the current credit system leaves tens of millions of Americans out. They're either difficult to score or unscorable. And it's because we're using math that was created in the 1950s, which has served us well over the many years. And we're many times using an industry score that was created in the 80s or late 80s or what have you, which I love the 80s, great music and really funny dress attire. But there's really a better way. And so I have personally enjoyed learning from the rest of the organization, the people around me, because a lot of the math that we're using today was created after I was even out of school. And so it's been a cool journey for me on that front, but also I think to underpin why I'm excited about it is we're solving an important issue for society and for America.
What were some America? That's right. Exactly. We're gonna have to do the podcast moving forward in a Southern accent. All right.
Yeah, America. Yeah.
Well, for some people wondering, what are some of the scoring methods, and why does it create this disparity between people who can get access and people who can't?
Sure. Well, it starts with the data. It's encoded in the data. And so let's maybe some simple examples. Let's first talk about representation. And so if you take a national sample of credit data and start looking at, are they full credit files, meaning I've got a deep background? And what you start to realize is that people of color within the US tend to have more errors on their credit report and can tend to have a thinner file, meaning they have less history. And so if you have logistic regression, which is what the industry scores are created off of, with 15 to 20 variables, and you have missing data, they become unscorable or are viewed as riskier, and therefore they get a higher interest. And guess what that does? That perpetuates this vicious cycle of debt, of higher interest debt that they're at. The second area is when you talk about representation is, I'll go to the other side. So Greg Young, who's the CEO of Hawaii USA, he's one of our customers, and he said, Mike, the problem for me with the industry scores is I don't know that they have representation of Pacific Islanders. And so it's something that was created for LA and Dallas and Miami and New York City and Chicago. But what about Oahu? What about Molokai? What about Lanai? And so being able to create something that's tailored and represented from a data perspective for those communities, I think really sets it apart. I think the other area of bias comes with the scoring method itself, is that there are proxies within many organizations and financial institutions, and there are models that are proxies for race or gender. Maybe the simplest example I'd give you is let's say there's a Fintech company that uses doing a student loan model, and they include something like what university or school you graduated from or you're attending. And so if I told you, George, that I've got a respondent that went to Howard University versus Harvard University, you might be able to guess what race they are. And that, by not being purposeful about how you build your model, you can actually encode bias into the model itself. And then the other area is really on the strategies, because you have to look at, so I've this great credit policy, I've got this more accurate, more inclusive score, but do I have policies in place that are disparately impacting Americans? And so Pew Research, I want to say their last year put out a study that said the average female makes 82 cents on the dollar. I think it's 82 or 83 in that range. And so, but most banks and financial institutions have a credit policy around debt to income. And so if the income is lower, even though at the same debt load, they're viewed as riskier. Therefore, they're kicked out to manual review. And you get this inconsistent response from manual underwriters. And so you could be disparately impacting a female borrower by that type of policy. And so it's really in the areas of data, it's the model itself, as well as the strategy with which you're deploying. That is where that bias gets added in.
How do you remove that bias when you're building technology that's initially being built by humans who inherently could have that bias themselves? Like, what kind of processes do you have to make sure that doesn't flow into a model?
So I'll start first with purpose. So we talk a lot about our technology. We're super proud of what we built, but it's where purpose actually meets technology is where Zest needs to live, is that we have to be purposeful about working with the customer and understanding what is your mission that you're on here. Are you really trying to broaden access to equitable lending for your communities? And if so, everything we do, whether it be the data model or strategy, have to be looked at through that lens. The second thing that we do, and most organizations I don't think talk enough about it, is like, who is actually building the model? So if you have an entire room full of people who look exactly like me, you're going to only have one prism to look at a problem. Versus at Zest, we're very purposeful about the diversity with which we hire our technologists, whether it be engineers or data scientists. It's nearly 7 out of 10 are diverse in some way at Zest when you look at our technical organization. And that's purposeful. It starts with the purpose of what we believe and what we're trying to accomplish, and we want to be mindful about it. But then it goes to the who is actually building itself. Now, that's not to say that our technology doesn't have IP in it to actually debias the model itself, to actually help our customers serve more of their members in an equitable fashion. Absolutely. We've got patents coming out of our ears on this topic. But it's the softer side of like being purposeful. It's the mission of what are you trying to accomplish, the people, and then the technology will come and bring you the rest of the way there.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. The other place I wanted to go to, again, keep in mind, like maybe some folks listening understand the technical piece, inherently, but maybe others don't. I think a lot of folks probably will wonder, where does the AI piece actually come? Right? Think of someone and base your answer on someone who isn't in the AI space to begin with. Like for me, for example, I'm a business background. I see AI floating around all the time, especially in pitch decks nowadays. Everybody is doing something around AI. And sometimes it is meaningful. Sometimes they really just place it as a marketing tool. So for folks listening, how is AI actually being leveraged in this example, and where do you see its use the most powerful from where you sit?
Well, listen, there's certainly a bunch of snake oil out there. There's a lot of fake AI. Oh, we're using AI for everything. You know, it's like tie your shoes, you've got AI.
Yep.
No. So if we think about what is AI doing, it's the ability to use better math, predominantly is calculus and stats, but it's better math, but consume more data. And so the current credit system has an equation called logistic regression that uses 15 points of data. If you've ever seen the game, my kids are playing it all the time, Minecraft, it's like a bunch of block characters. It's like a low resolution television. That's 15 variables that would describe you, George. Versus if you leverage AI and I'm trying to create a clear, more high fidelity image on you as a borrower, I'm actually able to consume 300, 400 points of data. And because it's not a linear type of thing, it's like humans learn. We pull in multiple points of data from different things. And so imagine you and I are in downtown LA. We're all walking down a dark alley. There's a dude, he shaved his head, he's got tattoos everywhere, he's super muscular, and he's holding a bat. There's a lot of data there. Dark alley, shaved head, tattoos, bat, etc. Your brain is pulling all of these things together that are unrelated to make a decision, not in a linear fashion, but they're all different categories coming together. So AI is doing that same thing and looking for connections that yield that higher fidelity image of that borrower in this decision.
Understood. Is there a piece as a father of, I believe you said 5 children? So both as a father and as a CEO in the space that has a lot to do with AI, and you see newer platforms that are more consumer related, like a GPT, a Bard, etc., Copilot. What is your take as a father when you see platforms like that on the come up with kids who I'm sure are leveraging it more and more and will continue to do so? Are you bullish or are you sort of on the bearish side?
Oh, I would say as long as we're thoughtful, I'm very excited about the promise and prospect, because it really can supercharge humanity. But it starts with what we believe as a society and what we're trying to accomplish. And so if you're going to be using OpenAI to do your homework for you and to write your essays, that's not actually a great outcome. But if you're looking at it to help you gain access to information in a more relatable and easy fashion with using a large language model where you ask it in human readable questions versus needing to know Python and writing a bunch of code, you're actually able to use a large language model and ask it a simple question and get access to information. I think the potential for me is that's able to unlock one of the things that make us great as humanity, is our creativity, our ability to create something that doesn't exist and imagine something even better as a collective. But it starts with that heart. It's like, what do we believe as a society and what do we want this to do? So you can use tools, whether if you have a hammer, my grandpa was a carpenter, and so you can use it to build a house, and it's this wonderful use, or you could take a hammer and hit me over the head with it. It can be used for evil. And so in this situation, it's so critical that you always have to get back to what are our shared values? What do we believe? What purpose do we want to have? And so the two have to exist together. They really do. And so the need for us, even in technical organizations, or even as I talk to my children, to talk beyond, hey, I can explain to you about how this math problem works, but like, actually, what are we trying to accomplish? What's the purpose behind that? That, I think, is really going to be critical as we go forward to actually harness the real promise of this technology and solution.
Yeah. That's a good point. I had this slight debate with over sort of a work dinner recently with some
Mm-hmm.
stakeholders. One of them
Mm-hmm.
is a good friend who's a CPA by background,
Mm-hmm.
making a bullish case overall on
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT as a platform and AI and kind of the future of it, but more around the implication for his kids. One of the interesting things, though, that he said is, again, he's a CPA by background, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said at the time when he wrote his CPA designation, which was, let's say, 15, 20 years ago, he actually felt it was a bit easier because most of the exam that he had to write was much more on memorization basis
Mm-hmm.
versus understanding and applying,
Mm-hmm.
theory in different contexts and in a
Mm-hmm.
more practical scenario. Nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing more of the opposite, which is actually harder. It's not just memorize
Mm-hmm.
and spit out, memorize and spit out.
Yeah.
So hopefully, to your point, the intentionality is there, so that you're
Oh,
using
good
this as a
word.
tool, right, to make you more
Yeah.
effective, not just
Mm-hmm.
to give you the answer and make it easier. I think that's maybe what's important as guardrails for parents to kids, is making
Yeah.
sure their intention of how they use it is it the right way.
That's super insightful. I like this, the intention. What's the intention behind it? The intentionality. That's great.
Right, because it kind of scares me. Dude. I use it a lot. Like I'm an active user.
Mm-hmm.
One thing though that sometimes scares me is like, let's say it's your birthday, Mike. We're brothers, all
Mm-hmm.
right,
Mm-hmm.
and we're both busy. You're an entrepreneur, CEO. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
surgeon. I barely have
Mm-hmm.
time to call you and be like, hey, Mikey, happy birthday, man. Wish you the best. God bless. Blah blah
Yeah.
blah.
Yeah.
Instead, I go to ChatGPT and I'm like, hey, can you write me like a quick happy birthday? This is my brother. I want to send
Yeah.
it over by text. Like it's kind of sad
Yeah.
when you see again the intentionality behind it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's
I
where my
think
mind
so.
goes.
I think. Hey, if you receive an email from me that's longer than half a page, it's been written
It's
by
chat.
AI.
Maybe
But
just set
what is
parameters.
what is my intention? So what is my intention? It's like if I'm going to not spend as much time writing my good buddy Virgin email, am I going to replace that with doing something else that's more meaningful for society? If so, I get a
True.
pass. And so right now I'm going to give myself a pass.
Yes, you get a pass, Mike. I want to go
Yeah.
back to leadership. I
Okay.
really liked where we started off, if you don't
Sure.
mind. But I'm interested to ask you more about imposter syndrome. I didn't get to touch
Hmm.
on that real quick, but again, you're a CEO of a company that has more than how many employees in total? 110, 120. Not a small
Yeah.
org.
Yeah.
It's growing.
Hmm.
You manage many stakeholders, customers. How do you
Hmm.
keep yourself centered when you have all this pressure on you?
It's an active mindfulness practice. I actively meditate every day. That's the foundation of it. And so, I mean, heck, Monday and Wednesday, Patty Mancini, who is our head of people ops, leads guided meditation in the office. And so,
Oh, that's cool.
literally centering yourself, it's not a lip service thing. It's like we live that as a culture, and being able to do things like that, I think, is really been important.
So what does a typical day in the life look like for you as a CEO of one of the fastest growing fintechs in the U.S., if not the
Mm-hmm.
world? What is a
Mm-hmm.
day in the life for someone
Mm-hmm.
wondering?
So let's see here. So we'll get up at 5 o'clock. 5:30, I'll swing by, pick up our general counsel. We'll drive to the office, get there by about 6:30 or so. We'll hit the gym for an hour. The sixth floor of the building we're in is an entire gym. Work out for an hour. I always, after working out, have a one-on-one with one of the teammates. And so it might be a data scientist, it might be someone from finance or accounting, and we go have a coffee. And so you had me on
Mm.
let's grab coffee. I'm always a sucker for it. So,
Nice.
and so I would say the greater percentage of my day is spent being client facing or externally facing. Then there's also a great mix of internal. So I'm working with internal organizations on, for example, we're about to actually, wait, it's hot. It came out off the presses today. We announced Lulu, which is our large language model that leverages generative AI. And so
Mm.
spending time with the teams creating that next generation of AI, helping solve the problems that we're trying to solve, and then doing check-ins with them and continuing to push that ahead. I think that's it. Now, might mix in getting my nails done here and there, having some good food at lunch with the whole team.
Nice.
I will tend to do most of my one-on-ones on a walk around Burbank. So that's pretty it.
Do you ever get nervous Do you ever get anxiety around,
Oh
like,
yeah.
let's say you guys have a town hall, you walk on stage and things could be going well, but for some reason, no
Oh
specific, but
gosh, yeah, yeah.
how do you deal with that, dude? I'm always curious
Oh my
with
gosh.
CEOs.
And listen, George, you hit it. I'll be in DC on starting on Sunday. It's our biggest conference, government affairs conference or government affairs council for the credit union industry. So
Mm,
thousands of people. I've got a panel. There will be 800 people in the audience. That it doesn't stress me out. The launch meeting at the beginning of this year, where we had all the employees together in one room, that stresses me out. And you know why? Because I actually care about it. Like
I was
I
gonna
not that
say,
I don't
yeah,
care in these public settings, but this is my community of
yeah.
people, and like I have a particular job that I want to be able to look. Man, is that stressful? And so I definitely do the breathing technique. As
Mm,
far as before I get on there, I really focus in on being mindful and have 3 mindful breaths, 3 seconds on the way in, holding for 3 seconds, 3 seconds on the way out. It it sounds so basic, but if you actually do it, it really works hand in hand again. I think this thing is just going on the stage and giving yourself grace, which is like, I don't need
mm,
to be perfect, but people are going to get that, you know what, Mike cares about this topic. He's passionate and he's genuine. That'll win the day over style and flair. I wish I sounded like Obama on the stage and I had that ability to orate in front of large groups, but I do hope that when people hear me speak, whether it's the team or external people, as they get from me, Mike is being his authentic self. A lot of them are
mm.
not, but he is at least being true to himself.
Yeah, that's I really like that. I do that as well, like the Huberman, kind of method. He talks about the psychological side, I think, or the breath, which is
Mm-hmm,
what you're talking about as well. That
mm-hmm,
works. I always
mm-hmm.
remind myself too that we're all leaving this place anyways at some point.
Yeah,
So even that quick reminder, like where if this was my last day, would I be this nervous, or would I
yeah,
actually go out there and have some fun?
yeah.
So
What really matters today, right? Like what really
exactly.
mattered. Like last Friday was the daddy-daughter dance. My daughter Dasha, who's 11,
Oh, that's cute.
and I was just looking the whole day for that was what was important. It wasn't the business meeting that was me. It was my priority, which is my family and my children, and getting to focus in on that. And I think what you're saying resonates with me. This idea of this is our life and what is important, and that's where I need to be placing importance and time and energy and emotion into that. And the other stuff, give yourself a little grace,
Mm.
and you'll find your way.
Last one for you. For usually I ask for lessons learned. We didn't touch on the capital raising much, but you guys have
Mm-hmm,
raised more than 120 million. Again, you're leading a very fast growing fintech startup.
mm-hmm,
For folks in the fintech space, what are some of those lessons learned that you've picked up, whether it's been on the capital raise, managing a big
mm-hmm,
team, trying to
mm-hmm,
stay innovative when you are the banner of innovation? I feel like that's always
mm-hmm,
a hard thing too. What are some of those
mm-hmm.
gems that you can share with our community?
Well, so raising capital, not all dollars are equal. And so taking money from an organization that could help you on your mission versus a company that's just looking for a return on investment. So, for example, John Rosenbaum, who's on our board, is from Insight Partner. There's an individual who really believes that he wants to help solve the issues in our economy around broadening access to equitable lending. He actually believes that and cares about that. And the entire Insight organization has leaned in. They have centers of excellence, whether it be around topics of sales or product development, go-to-market, things of that sort. And they've made themselves sellable to help us solve that solution. And so, my encouragement is don't quickly just jump in and take money. Not all dollars are equal. You really want to be thoughtful about bringing people into your organization and investing in your organization that can help move the ball ahead. The second area would be around, look to your customers as well. We've actually had some great success actually having some of our customers invest in us. If that isn't a proof that you've got good market product fit, I don't know what is, but there's no better person to have a seat on that board to help guide you than a customer who's actually in the industry that you're trying to serve for. So you look at all these big, companies out there that they've got an ex-ambassador and they've got the secretary of data. Like, what are they actually doing helping move this business ahead? Other than I feel really cool that I've got these high-end names out there. No way. DT Maliwal, who's from Upfront, she's the head of the fintech practice. She's on board. Brilliant individual. The thing that blows me away, she always leads with her heart. She cares about every zesty in the company. She cares and asks about my being every time we talk. Not all dollars are equal, so be thoughtful about who you have investing in your organization. I think the second area would be really around, separate from capital raise, is that I had this tendency to I have fallen in love with AI. Yes, I have. I probably have to admit it to my wife. But I've fallen in love with AI. But you can't fall in love with the idea that AI can be everything to everyone, and that Zest AI can solve every AI problem out there. And so though you love your solution, you still need to have focus. And so if you've raised capital, focusing that investment in a particular area like Zest AI has done, we've focused it on a difficult to solve problem, underwriting. Highly regulated, difficult problem to solve, lots of documentation, lots of hurdles and barriers to solving that problem. So we focused in on that and didn't go to chatbots and customer journey, all very important and great applications. We focused as an organization, and because of that, we were efficient with our capital, but at the same time, we were very clear on the mission and what we were trying to solve. It reminds me of when Lexus came to the US. They had Beat Mercedes all over their plant. It's like Beat Mercedes. That's all they wanted to do, is they're going to have a new luxury brand. Toyota was launching a luxury brand, and now we accept it. But back then, it was like, no way, this company coming over from Japan can compete with the Germans. Well, look at Lexus today. And so that really simple focus that they have as an organization helped them and served them well.
Love it. So many gems in there. I just love, for me, I think more so, I wasn't sure actually how the conversation was going to go, whether it was going to be very technical or more on the leadership side. I did want to just thank you for bringing your authentic self, because we got a taste of it. I'm sure you do this at Zest all the time, but it's kind of refreshing, man, to see that come out. So thank you. It was definitely refreshing for me, and kudos to everything you're building at Zest AI. And I'm just excited to see what the next year or two brings for you.
Yeah, it's exciting. Wait till stay close. Keep your eye on Lulu, our new form of AI that we just launched and announced today. It's pretty darn exciting. That'll be the first application in a B2B setting where we're creating custom B2B AI companions for banks and credit unions to solve some pretty cool issues.
There you go. Check it out. I think, LinkedIn, Mike Vere, and then follow it on Zest.ai for all the upcoming milestones and news.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, brother. Great conversation.